I think it's time to say officially welcome to this event, Rethink Peace, genuinely homegrown and locally owned solutions for peaceful and inclusive societies. This is part of Geneva Peace Week, and we are expecting quite a lot of people. As we mentioned before, 703 people registered. So as people come in, I'm just going to give you all of some housekeeping tips. My name is Hannah Brown. I'm the voluntary president of Inclusive Peace. And I've been invited to be the motivation host today. So it's really nice to be here from Tallinn, Estonia, as I already mentioned before, to introduce this panel and also give you some motivation throughout the day. So I've already got some people in the chat networking, telling us who they are, everything, but please continue to do that. And also please continue to put in your thoughts and ideas and suggestions as you hear the panel speakers and in the breakout sessions as well. We really want to, the whole point of this session is to hear from you as well as to have a high level discussion on this topic. So please don't be afraid, every idea you have, every experience you've had will be very invaluable for this conversation. So just a few technical things that we're going to start with. So the agenda today is after I've finished with a few more introductions and some icebreakers as well, we'll then go into the formal panel discussion, and that's led by Dr. Thania Paffenholz of Inclusive Peace. Following that, there'll be a little break for coffee and maybe a little stretch and everything. And after that, there'll be breakout discussions. And today we're going to have 2 breakout discussions, each are 15 minutes. As I mentioned before, we're going to be recording, we already are recording this panel, or this plenary, where we're in plenary, where we're recording, but in the breakout sessions, we won't be recording that. So if you do have a bit of a, if you're a bit uncertain about maybe being recorded in the plenary, you're most welcome to switch off your camera for the plenary and for the panel discussion. But we really encourage you in the breakout sessions to turn your camera on and just be really interactive. Put your hands up, tell us your experience, type things in the chat if you prefer to do it that way. During the plenary, during the panel, it would be great if you could keep the mutes on so that we don't have so much background noise, which so far has been really good. So that's not really a problem, but I'd just like to say it to make sure. I think that's it. One more thing, only the speakers' cameras will be recorded by Zoom. We have it in speaker mode. So another reason not to be too worried about the recording going on in the plenary. So as I said, 2 rules of engagement in the breakout sessions. 1, please keep your cameras on, and number 2, please engage. Okay, the third thing that I want to talk about is I really want to welcome our graphic illustrator, Yulia Zlatkov. So she's going to be basically drawing an illustration of this discussion today. There she is. And so,
hi everyone, really excited to be joining you guys.
Hi Yulia, so nice to meet you, and I'm really excited to see what you come up with after this. And the things from the plenary will go in, will feed into her work. Also the breakout sessions, the moderator is going to work really hard to feed back all of your good suggestions and ideas. And then at the end, we'll see the end product, and it will be amazing, I'm sure. And we'll also be posting it on the Inclusive Peace LinkedIn page. So be sure to follow the Inclusive Peace LinkedIn page if you want to share and repost that image. Okay. So I think we're at 1:35 now, and well, Central European time, should I say. So I think we've got 122 participants in. So I think it's probably a really nice number to get started with an icebreaker or 2. And I think Ryan is going to help me with this, right? So the first task we've got here is we've got a few questions that we would like you to ask. So if everyone could just take a few seconds now to let us know where you're calling from. It looks like there's a lot in Europe, but a lot in the Americas as well. Oh, it's pretty even, Africa, MENA, and Asia and the Pacifics. I'm impressed if you're at Asia and the Pacifics because I think it's quite late at night now. So okay, maybe, yep, there we go. So we've got 84% participated. So mostly Europe, 72%. And then everywhere else pretty similar apart from Asia. Okay, let's go to the next question, Ryan. Thank you. So what's in your cup? What are you drinking? I have a water here, but I'd love to know what everyone else is drinking. So if you can see the poll on your screen, please choose your answer. Choose what you're drinking. Lots of coffee, lots of water. Oh, some people don't have a cup. Well, you have a little bit of time to go and get a drink if you if you do need something to drink, because this is going to be, you know, a nice discussion. So it might be a good idea to get some water or coffee or tea to help you out. Thanks, Ryan. I think I think we've got that one covered, and water is definitely the winner, which is great. A few people have something stronger. I like that. Yep. Okay, so this one we really wanted to add the emoji faces here, but we unfortunately Zoom wouldn't let us do this. So our wonderful Ryan has really excelled himself here by drawing some beautiful emojicons in the old-fashioned way. So please just let us know how you're feeling. What's your current mood? I'm really happy to see that lots of people are excited. A few people are a bit confused because they're just landing in the room, wondering why we're asking you about emojis in a peace building conference. No, it's all fine. Just a little icebreaker. Okay, so here we go. Excited and just landing in the room. Some people with mixed feelings. Well, hopefully we can change those later. Here's question 4. Okay, have a look through the participants here in the Zoom session. How many people in here do you know? So if there's no one, then maybe it's a really good opportunity for you to reach out and send them your LinkedIn, reach out, have a chat. If there's someone from an institution that you're really interested in working with or working for, these are the types of places where it's great to meet people. So, all right, that one's ended. And so there's quite a lot of people here, over 50%, who don't know anyone. So please reach out, network. That's what these events are for. I think we've got one more, right? Question 5. This is, what is your level of experience in the field of peace building? Don't take this too, you know, literally. It could you could have been working on grassroots, community-based peace building for many years. Please make sure you're enthusiastic and good with your make sure you're confident in your abilities. Some people don't have any existing. I'm sure they do. Any form of mediation or conflict resolution, even in a family, I think is probably a bit of peace building. But here we go. So many people in the 0 to 2 years, and then even up above 5, and lots of people 10+. That's really cool. So we have like a nice mix of people at different points in their careers and levels of experience and everything. Okay, I think this is the last question, but we do have one more thing that we're going to do next, I believe, which is a slightly different type of question. So it would be really cool if you either got your smartphone and took a photo of the QR code and went onto the menti.com website, or the other thing that you can do is you can also click, go to Menti. Yes, here we go. In the chat, Julia has just put the Menti URL, so you can go to that. And then we'd really love to hear in 3 words describe the ideal peace process. So just to let you know, we're going to ask you this now, and we are actually going to ask you this question again at the end of the workshop, just to see whether maybe your ideas have changed, or you've had a different opinion based on the discussions that you've heard today. I'm really loving the answers already, though. Lots of inclusive. This is great, because, you know, that's what our organization is about. Collaborative, just, local, respectful, listen, understand, act. I like that. I like the active nature of the 3 words there. Feminist, very good. Sustainable, interesting. And digital, this is a great one. I'm living, as I've said a few times, in Estonia, which is a very digital nation. So it's a word close to my heart, definitely. Justice, equity, tolerance, dialogue, non-violence, commitments. Yes, I mean, I think we're going to hear a lot of these words today in the panel, and I'm sure they'll come out in the breakout sessions as well. I think that I'm getting to the to the point where I need to be handing over. So I'd really love to get Thania up, ready to do her panel session. And I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll let Thania introduce all the speakers, and welcome again, and have a really fabulous discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and welcome everybody. I've worked a long time with Hannah. I didn't know she's also a motivational coach, but I'm learning as I go. That was pretty cool. And so yes, welcome everybody to, so I was told I'm doing the substance part. I'm very glad that I don't have to do the rest, because I'm really not good at it, not at tech, and also not at all the other things Hannah did. So I'm really happy to have you all here, and very much looking forward to this discussion. So rethinking, it says actually rethinking peace, but in essence, we're talking about rethinking peace processes. So why are we even talking about this? And why have we joined hands, all the co-organizers that Hannah already mentioned, a lot of peers from the peace building and mediation field. We are actually having an ongoing conversation among us about how do we all as institutions also and people deal with the fact that the international system of peacemaking and peace building just simply doesn't seem to be fit for purpose. And this was an ongoing conversation, or is an ongoing conversation we are having. And I think what we're doing today is broaden this conversation, to have this conversation with all of you. And what was sort of the motivator for this conversation was really a lot of seeing that the official peace processes, the big high-level mediation processes very often are stuck since many, many years. We not even have to talk about what happened in Afghanistan to understand that Syria, Yemen, and other processes are stuck. There hadn't been negotiations for many, many years. We also see that the local efforts, some of the very good local efforts, often are not connected to other levels, and alone in itself also maybe haven't achieved the peace we were looking for. We also see so much more superpower confrontation as we had maybe dreamt of. We see that climate change is seriously affecting people and adds on to sort of conflicts. We also see many more coups happening. We just had one last week in Sudan, as you know. We see more authoritarian regimes coming up. So we have a potpourri of constellations at the moment in the world where we see, and when we look then at what peace building and peace processes do, we felt like there's some innovation in the last 10 years, certainly. There's certainly more inclusive processes, there's more digital processes, all the words you mentioned before. But in essence, it's not really fit for purpose. So we come to the conclusion, so how can we rethink these processes in a way that there is more homegrown and locally led processes? What do we mean by that? So I think what we mean not by that, to start with that, is that we're not just talking about homegrown or local means the local on the grassroots. No, we mean the whole, a holistic arena of what can organizations, people, everybody do to move peace processes, to move us all forward to more inclusive. And you mentioned it in the wordings: inclusive, sustainable, feminist. You had all these different words of what peace could be. So what can we all contribute, and what can we learn from each other, and from those who had been longer on that road, and from those who come fresh into the play, as we have seen. And for that, we're having a short kick-off panel discussion. Before then, you will all discuss among yourselves in the groups. So for the kick-off panel discussion, I would like to welcome our speakers, and that is basically Caryn Dasah, we have Stephanie Williams, and we have Hamza Lawal, and we have Youssef Mahmoud. We actually lost Ola to technical reasons. So we're gonna start with Caryn Dasah, and Caryn is from Cameroon. And I will right away dive into the first question. Caryn, you have been involved in the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon, and you've also engaged in women inclusion therein. Can we talk about Cameroon today of having a homegrown process, or is the process also stuck? And what has the role been of women therein? Can you kickstart us? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Thania. Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining. I want to talk about first, explain to participants what the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest is all about, and talk about the women's role, and look at what is working, look at the barriers and the opportunities that we all have. When war comes, it never ever signals. I always say it never rains, it pours. Women, we do not sit, and no one sits in their homes and invites armed conflict. It just comes, and most of the time you find yourself on the front line trying to bridge a gap, trying to provide services, trying to secure the life and welfare of your family, of your friends and your community members. And that is how we found ourselves working as peace builders. We found ourselves in a situation where we were exposed to the sounds of guns. I am not a good security expert, so I will not know their names, but you can differentiate from the different sounds that this one is higher, this one is lesser. And then everything became the past. Source of livelihood, the displacement, loss of family members, sexual assault, harassment, kidnaps, etc. Women, I will not say that we have a home built or a peace protocol or process or a locally owned process, because when the crisis started, women came together in a group and did a lot of advocacy. First, the women were on the streets to talk about peace, to call for non-violence, to call for an end to the shootings, the killings, and everything. And then, when there is shooting, when there is war, people lost their lives, and family members and loved ones. Now, how have women in Cameroon been able to position themselves in the peace process in their country? There's always been an issue of exclusion of women, because they feel that mostly men are prone to join armed groups and hold guns. And since they hold guns, they think that solving an issue with guns always has to do with people holding the guns. So we always have a tokenistic interference or participation of women in the peace process. And what have we been able to do? We've been able to globalize and form coalitions and networks, which we think that are powerful tools, because collective voices are heard. When you come together in groups and in despite your differences, despite who you are and where you're from, but because of womanhood, and because we are looking at the opportunities that we have as women to contribute meaningfully in ending the crisis in our region. For the opportunities, we've had the operationalization of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, and which we did the National Action Plan on 1325. And also there is the operationalization of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250, which has been operationalized also in Cameroon, and also recognizing the role that young people play in resolving armed conflict. I want to look at the other opportunities that we have as women is women, first of all, are already very active in the process. Their effective participation in peace building, and they have knowledge on what peace building is all about. So we are not talking about women who don't have the slightest idea or are not open to learning or don't have knowledge on what peace building is. We're talking of women who are already active in the process and already working and making great strides in finding lasting solutions to a conflict that is affecting their country, affecting their regions. What we want to talk about, I want to talk about the point of view from the barriers perspective. I want to say the participation to me is tokenistic, because you will not relate the number of men as to women. You will not compare. You realize that the women's participation is still very timid. And that is something that we've all been raising our voice in advocating for the inclusion of women in the peace process, in the entire process, and not just being beneficiaries to some of these rules, but being part of the decision-making processes. We have issues of funding women's initiatives, which sometimes they have very good and powerful ideas on how to push the peace agenda forward, and most of the time they don't get the required or the resources that they need to carry on this, some of these projects. We also have issues of difference in ideologies. Different people have different ideologies, people have different agendas as to what they want, what they expect, and what the solution means to them. What do they want? Do they want the gun silence? And how this process entails? So it is an issue of people being at the two ends, with different demands, with different needs, and which to them, they have their own priorities as to what peace means to them. And we have, I want to also talk about the what we expect from the international community and international organizations and institutions of goodwill. The first point is we expect more solidarity and support from the work that the women are doing already in their country in trying to meaningfully contribute in brokering for peace in their communities. We need to bring the women's agenda to light. Like when I mean solidarity, I mean having people supporting the activities, the work, the aspirations of what the women are doing to ensure that they meaningfully contribute in building peace in their country, and exposed to resources, capacity building, role modeling, which entails having other people who have gone through similar scenarios in their countries and building this solidarity with their own sisters, like in Cameroon, like other sisters who have gone through armed conflict in their country before and who have stood the test of time and have succeeded in brokering for peace, can serve as role models and mentors and support the work of their own other sisters in Cameroon and amplify the work that they are doing.
Thank you, Caryn. So basically what you're saying is women are already doing a lot. They have a lot of knowledge. They're very competent, but their inclusion into the peace process is still very kind of, you said, tokenistic or cosmetic. It's really not like allowing participation in decision-making. And what you're also saying, which I really like, is it's not just about money that needs to come from the internationals. It's about solidarity. It's about friendship. It's about sharing. It's about supporting. So I think that's already something I think which we can take in terms of what is the support that can come from outside. Thank you very much. I'm turning to Stephanie Williams, and she's from the US and was very involved in the Libya peace process, as we will hear in a second. And I think, Caryn, you can then put probably your camera off. And what I see is, by the way, when I put my camera on again after you've talked, it means you kind of slowly wrapping up. So I'm your wrapping up sign. So Stephanie, you have been, as I said, involved actually as the acting SRSG in the process in UN SRSG in the process in Libya. And I think it's an interesting process which is super highly internationalized. And at the same time, there's also sort of the local process. So it would be very interesting for us to know how this interface between the highly internationalized, but still enabling a local process. What are the lessons you're currently having? Over to you.
Thanks so much, Thania, and thanks to all of the organizers for this event on the launch of Geneva Peace Week. I am pleased to be able just to share my own reflections on the Libyan peace process that I ran. So I'm going to go from sort of the 10,000 foot level down to the more granular level, as I described what you have very accurately characterized as it is an internationalized civil war. And so the approach that we took, and I spent, almost 3 years, over 2.5 years in the UN mission, first as the deputy and then as the acting. The overall approach that we took, I can break it down into sort of 4 areas. One is that we decided that to put the UN, to put the United Nations mission in the driver's seat in terms of the mediation. As the most neutral international actor in what is an internationalized conflict. And then as part of that the UN would place the interests of the Libyans above the interests of the various foreign powers and interfering countries in the conflict. We also agreed that part of our mediation philosophy would be to place the interests of the average Libyan above the interests of what we called the predatory ruling class. And this encompassed, a range of military, political, and economic actors. So we also, in our mediation approach, took a conductor versus soloist approach. And what does that mean? It meant that we did rely on NGOs. There were a number of NGOs who were on the ground. There were also international NGOs who had certain expertise in Libya. One of the international NGOs is, in fact, one of the co-sponsors of this event, and that's the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, who helped us in the preparatory process for what would have been the national conference held, and it was aborted. It was supposed to be held in April 2019. We also relied, for instance, on Chatham House for a lot of that work that we did in the economic area. After the attack on Tripoli, in April 2019, what we had to do is we had to rebuild a fragile international consensus around the Libya issue. So what we did was the former SRSG Hassan Salama went to Berlin, met with Chancellor Merkel. Germany agreed to sponsor, to host the Berlin process, where we built this very fragile international architecture, but a consensus that the conflict needed to stop. And under that, we built the intra-Libyan tracks: political, economic, military, and then an overarching international humanitarian law and human rights track. The international umbrella allowed the Libyans to engage with each other. And the 3 tracks, the intra-Libyan tracks, ran parallel, but we did not require that you had to see progress exactly on the same pace in every track, but that you could use, progress in one track to push for progress in another track. In the political track, which I'll spend the most time here talking about, because this is where really the inclusion of women, the gender component, became most prominent. How? So underneath the formal political track, I ran 3 sub-tracks: women, youth, and municipal councils. We had to meet virtually because we did all of this in the context of COVID, but we were able to bring approximately 200 women into online conversations. We assigned a rapporteur who fed into the formal track 1 political dialogue. And so that was extremely helpful. In the formal dialogue itself, I insisted on having a strong block of women The women made a huge difference. First of all, they brought practical expertise, lawyers, constitutional experts, human rights expertise, civil society. They formed a very comprehensive and united bloc, which insisted on things like a certain 30% participation of women in senior positions in what became the National United Government. I would say that the other piece that we applied here was the insistence on transparency. And this really came to fore also in the political process, and particularly in the session that we held in Geneva in February of this year to select the government, where virtually the whole thing was broadcast. The other piece here in terms of transparency was we ran digital dialogues. So the polling that you did on this this particular event initially is the kind of polling that we did in 5 separate digital dialogues that were run between October of 2020 and February of 2021, in which many Libyan youth participated, and we used that platform to, first of all, confirm our own understanding of the drivers of the conflict, particularly the economic drivers of the conflict in Libya, which cannot be, overestimated. Because look, it is fundamentally a conflict over access to resources and their distribution, and thus, a control or a conflict over power. And so to understand the economic drivers, to mainstream that into the political process was absolutely essential, which was why we ran the economic track, on an equal par with the political track and the military track. We also put a premium on messaging. So, I mean, I did a lot of press conferences, and I did a lot of, press with certain, publications and online engagements. And that was to always make sure that we were connecting with the Libyan people, that they understood what the mission was doing, that this was, in fact, a Libyan-led process, that we were facilitating these intra-Libyan tracks. And that we were also, frankly, countering a lot of the disinformation that was emerging, particularly the use and misuse of Facebook and the targeting, particularly of women participants in the peace process. And with that, I see you're back on stream, Thania, so I will end my presentation there. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. It's a very interesting approach you are describing. And what I really liked is this combination of normative with reality-based. So normative as in putting basically the Libyans over the internationals, but also putting the Libyan everyday person over the elite Libyan actors. So this is kind of the normative frame you operated. And then very reality-based sort of tracks, talking about economics, talking about the internationals are still there. You need to get them, you need to make them sort of basically peace with each other so that they can, so that's what I really like with reality-based, that you take the reality as it is. And also thank you for bringing that element of sort of the digital conversations and also the social media, which I think is a key issue in today's conflict, where the conflicts have basically, they run in reality, but they run on social media as well. And I think we can't have sort of any form of peacemaking and peace building without counteracting what's going on that front. So thank you very much for that, Stephanie, and we see you later in the breakout room. I'm moving now to our next speaker, Hamza Lawal. He is from Nigeria, and he's a very experienced campaigner on anti-corruption, has set up multiple platforms in many African countries. So in that sense, what you have just heard about this conflict and that peace process, and so where do you see that power of sort of cross, even in country, but also cross-country platforms that can engage for peace processes? Over to you, Hamza.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Hamza Lawal, and I'm the founder of Follow the Money. Follow the Money tries to answer where money is coming from, where it's going to, or most importantly, how judiciously this money is being utilized. And I always say that if you want answers, just follow the money. And this is a homegrown initiative that started in Nigeria. And what we found out from our data is that due to exclusion, there've been high level of vandalization of public facilities, be it healthcare center, be it public primary school, or even waterborne public tap. So what we did first was to try to get feedback from citizens why this is happening. So one, we found out that government does not do a needs assessment, and when they implement projects, they don't integrate the voices of citizens on it. So citizens don't see this project or campaigns as there. So because there's no feedback from citizens and no any sense of ownership. So what we did was to organize a town hall meeting. And interestingly, in our town hall meeting, the first thing we did was bring government people and get them to accept to attend. Bring the community members. But in the community, you have different people. You have men, you have women, you have people with disability, you have security agencies, you have youths, you have religious leaders and traditional leaders. So what we did was to identify key influencers in this clusters, like we call them, and then we bring them for first a town hall meeting. And at this town hall meeting is at the chief's palace or the chief's room in the community, and then they have a conversation. And in having those conversations, grievances were being addressed. People were airing their grievances. Government people were giving feedback and responses. And after that, what we now did is support this cluster, the leaders of these clusters, to go back, to their larger group, to share information and feedback from the town hall meeting, and also in that format collect more information and pass it into this group that we've created and founded. And our data have shown that vandalization has decreased over 80%. From just leading this conversation where people can air their grievances. But now also over 90% of government projects, citizens are now taking ownership of it, because from design implementation phase, citizens are adding their voices and they can effectively track and see how their tax money is being utilized. This also same we did in Kenya, we're doing in Cameroon. So in Cameroon, interestingly now, we got government approval to do a needs assessment in the primary healthcare center, leveraging on the outbreak of COVID-19 and government response in testing for COVID-19 and also providing vaccines. So we're now undertaking a needs assessment in Cameroon, in various counties, just talking to healthcare workers, talking to people that are meant to get vaccinated, and just collecting feedback on government responsiveness towards the outbreak of COVID-19. In Malawi, because of our intervention in Southern Africa, we worked with the president of Malawi, where we were able to identify bottleneck and corrupt cases, and got the president to sack, or rather fire, his minister for labor because of the corruption we've highlighted. And because of corruption, we've seen increase in conflict. We've seen increase, in communal crisis and clashes, just because government is not providing service delivery, but with misinformation and disinformation and amplifying all of this. So, working closely with government and creating homegrown solutions, using champions of Follow the Money in these countries across 9 African countries. But one thing that is prevalent is the role of women. So a lot of time, I think it's really exciting we're having this conversation. And I think we need to be deliberate, because a lot of time when we try to have conversation in communities, first I'll talk about, naturally there's this barrier that some people who are religious extremists or some people who are traditional extremists would leverage on these barriers and try to give women, and try to say, or specifically say there is a specific role for women in conversations like this, or women are supposed to take the back seat and just maybe even listen. In some communities, it will take us over 24 months just to make them understand that we need women voices. So it's that bad.
All right, Hamza, we don't hear you very well. maybe you try to close up, maybe you try to put your camera off, then the sound might be better when the camera is off.
When women are allowed to.
Hamza, do you hear me? All right. It seems to be off. All right. So I think we will see whether, oh, we have him back. Maybe you put your camera off and conclude. So because sometimes, yes, then your sound is better. So a final word from your end.
Just to say, we need to be really deliberate on ensuring that when we create safe space and ensure women are effectively integrated, but most importantly, women champion these causes and drive this conversation, because when there is crisis or conflict, women bears the brunt. Women and young people bears the brunt, and a lot of women in our various rooms and conversation in the town hall meeting actually have the homegrown solutions to this conflict and crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. Also, thank you for highlighting the instrument you're working with, these conversations, bringing different people together with the government on different levels and having these conversations that give spaces to basically sharing and following. And I think it's also very interesting to take the model to various countries, and it doesn't have to be always the health issue or this issue. So we also see that it is, what is peace? And how we do rethink it. It's not just this top level processes. It is happening all the time, but it's also not like here is this level and there's that level. It seems to be all interconnected. And we see that this platforming basically across, also cross-fertilizing, I think across the continent, is a super interesting learning. Thanks for sharing. And we see you later in the breakout room. So last but not least, we have Youssef, Mahmoud from Tunisia, New York, London, depending on what we want to talk about. So you have been, I mean, I don't even, so question, basically you have been with the UN for so much of your life. And you at the same time, I remember very well you saying, why have you been so tremendously successful at the UN? It's because you have been basically playing the system well, but maybe not done a lot of the right things you could have done, if I may be so blank. Okay, so what is it, to round up this conversation before we go to the groups, what is the experience you would like to share? What do you think is that rethink we need for sort of pushing these homegrown processes and kind of bringing it all together? Over to you, Youssef.
Thank you, Thania. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this virtual panel. Much has been said. What I will share with you is some of the lessons that I have learned as an unlettered practitioner over these years, and what the international actors should be doing differently. And I have written this book, which is essentially, as you alluded, a series of reflections on many of the errors that I perfected in good faith, trying to build peace with not much to show for it. And in that book, I make some observations and some lessons learned. Let me mention some of these quickly. The first observation is that peace agreements, when they happen, are usually the result of disagreeable trade-offs and elite bargains that have to be made to end wars, obviously. And thus, the simultaneous efforts to lay the foundations for durable peace, inclusion, justice, tend to be sacrificed on the altar of stability. I'm happy to hear that Libya is an exception. And the other observation is that peace is like a tree. It grows from the bottom up. And therefore, we need to listen to ordinary people. They know why peace came off the tracks, and they also know how to put it back on. So our approach, one of the major lessons that I drew from my experience is that our approach to peace building and peacemaking should be motivated by the humility to learn from what still works well in countries in conflict or emerging from conflict. And also to respect that every society, however broken it may appear, has self-correcting mechanisms and capacities, not just needs and vulnerabilities that need to be fixed. So what does that mean for international actors? Two things. The first is that we need to get involved and initiate some conceptual and attitudinal shifts in our thinking and doing. We need, for example, to interrogate some of the powerful assumptions that inform our understanding of peace and the practices we mobilize in its pursuit. For example, because we don't study peace directly, we tend to tie its fortunes to the presence or absence of conflict. And we continue to believe that if we understood and addressed the pathologies of war, peace would ensue. Second, we need to treat peace as a dynamic and complex system of becoming, rather than an externally driven end state. Under the best circumstances, peace is always arriving. And when it does, it needs to be constantly nurtured. So in practice, and I'm practitioner, so in practice, for some of us peacemongers and conflict resolution experts and so on and so forth, what does that mean actually on the ground? It simply means that armed with the humility I mentioned earlier, we should draw on the strength of our ignorance, which gives us the permission to ask probing questions and allow answers to emerge from the inside out, from those closest to the problem. It's an act of co-creation where outsiders listen with the intention to understand, not with the intention to help or solve. And practically means that we should frame the challenges facing countries in or emerging from crisis in terms of inadequate self-organizing societal capacities to anticipate, manage, and resolve their own conflict. Seen through this lens, the search for underlying causes of conflict becomes the search why this capacity is absent or inadequate, and where it exists, how it can be reinforced. This analytical shift takes us away from the obsessive examination of what is wrong with the host country and offers national stakeholders, including youth and women, an opportunity to articulate what is still going strong in their societies and where need is where support is needed. Let me conclude with this final thought. Obviously what I've just shared with you, I wish I had known when I was in the business of peacemaking and peace building. And now it sounds like what I'm saying still goes against the grain of the peace building enterprise. Whether it is conflict, climate change, or pandemic, international actors must recognize that our encounter with the world's many ills, including conflict, can no longer be explained by orthodox thinking or templated approaches, however universal we claim them to be. Whether it is democracy, sustainable development, these paradigms are under stress and even crumbling before our eyes. Coming from Tunisia, I can tell you a thing or two about the travails of electoral democracy a decade after the country was lionized as a democratic exception in the Arab world. So it's an opportunity for us to rethink how we approach the business of peace and who should we should empower to build it and sustain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Youssef. And I think I very much, of course, as you know, like what you say about that the peace processes. Peace is this, as I call it, perpetual undertaken that comes in cycles. And what you described also from Tunisia is this, like everybody saying, oh, wow, this is our super example. And now we all have to do it like that. Or maybe tomorrow people will pick up you, Stephanie, and say, tell us. Now the super example is Libya. So we tend to jump from one super example to the other instead of saying there are different types of processes, but basically peace is a constant process and it kind of repeats itself. Sometimes it goes backwards with an authoritarian sort of a system back in place. Sometimes it goes forward with jumps, with big jumps, and sometimes it's very tiny steps. But there is dynamics. And what I think also I'm getting from your conversation is that you say, and I think that's a very important point, let's not look at what is wrong and always how can we from outside fix what is wrong, but basically look into what works and then build on what works. And also the others mentioned a lot of things. And combine what works with the reality around and addressing the reality instead of what you also said, this sort of toolbox roadmap that will basically just be stuck and then you can't unstuck it because everybody is on the same roadmap. Instead of saying it changes all the time, it unfolds, and it's not just let's be more adaptive. No, it's just let's think differently and then sort of also adapt over time. I like that a lot. And so what happens now, we're going to continue the conversation among each other. And we're very happy that we have not 700 people joining because we were very scared about that. So now we can have a proper conversation. And I hand over to Hannah, our motivation coach, who will tell us how we continue. Over to you.
Thank you, Thania. This was an incredibly insightful panel. And I can see that a lot of people are raising their hands. We're not going to speak in this plenary from the floor, but keep your idea there because we're about to be moved into breakout sessions where you will have a real opportunity to speak and give your expertise and your experiences and your ideas. So I did see a few hands up, not right now, wait a couple of minutes. But the one thing that I really want everyone to do right now is, because we have been sitting for almost an hour, is to stand up. If you do have water or coffee, please stand up with me. I'm not going to do it properly just so you can still see me. Stand up, have a little shake around, move around a little bit. Just get your legs working so you don't get the pins and needles. You know, we're quite used to these Zoom calls these days, but we also need to make sure that we look after our bodies and after our health so that we can do all the amazing work that everyone here is doing. I really wanted to take you through a proper stretch, but we are running a few minutes behind schedule. So I think the best thing to do is, while you're all grabbing your coffee and you're standing up and shaking around, Ryan is going to randomly assign everyone into a breakout room. I think there's probably going to be about, I don't know, 10 rooms, something like this. There will be a moderator in the room, and they will take us through some questions that will give you all an opportunity to share your experiences and your thoughts. And then the moderators will bring back some of those ideas and feed them back into the plenary, both via Thania and also via the illustrator. So we will hear sort of a summary of some of the main issues that we're all discussing in these breakout sessions at the end. They are going to be 2 breakout sessions, but you'll stay in the same room. They're going to be almost 15 minutes each. Maybe we'll take maybe just a minute or 2 off them just so we can keep to our schedule. But please, Ryan, I think, do your technical magic, and hopefully everyone, you'll soon see an instruction that you're going to be put into a breakout room. So enjoy, everyone, and we'll see you back here very soon. Thank you. So we asked you to do this at the beginning, everyone, but we'd really like to hear again what you think, whether your opinion has changed about the 3 words to describe an ideal peace process, now that you've had an opportunity to reflect on the panel, on the amazing panelists' discussions, and also discussing in your own moderated panel sessions. You go to the Menti app, there's a link in the chat, or you can also use your phone and use the camera to get the QR code, and it will take you directly to Menti, and then add in what you think. And I wonder if it will be different or similar. I mean, we had some pretty nice words at the beginning, but I'll be interested to see. And I think while we're seeing those in, we can probably prepare for the next part of the agenda, which I think is the sum up. So Thania, why don't we bring you back to the middle, and you can start the sum up.
Yes, I think we also have the illustration. It's very small on my screen, so I just see a lot of bubbles around, but I can't really see it. So maybe we can get it also bigger. Yes, in terms of, yeah, that's, I think, bigger. So in terms of sum up, I think we heard a lot of things that were also, some of them echoing what we heard on the panel, others sort of adding to it. I think the first thing I would like to highlight is when we talk about rethink, we really need to think. That means it's not just act, but it's also thinking and basically taking the time also to reflect and think. And thinking is also not just criticizing, but being aware of what we have discussed, what is not working, what the power relations are embedded in the system, what we also have heard a lot, what the tokenistic inclusion is. And we heard that now in the discussions in the various rooms. What I got as feedback was that tokenism is not just women inclusion or youth inclusion, but it's also when including experts or other. So what we have also heard a lot is like these, what Youssef mentioned at the end, others have confirmed that these kind of fixation on certain way of doing it, and a stuckness in sort of certain pathways of thinking this and this sort of should be the way to do it. Also, this kind of funnily still existing kind of thing, the internationals and the local, and the international thinking about how can they support the locals, instead of thinking like, what are those spaces and conversations on various levels that need to be sort of supported, because it's also not just like, let's now think, how do we support the local, for example, as donors, what are the best means of doing it? But instead of saying like, what does a process need and how can we best support this process, for example, from the outside, if I take that. And what we have heard both in the panel, but also in the breakout groups is it's not just about the money. It is about solidarity. It's about a humbleness of understanding what works and helping sort of to go with that what works, but also having a reality-based approach that says what maybe blocks the things that work and how can then sort of these blockages be overcome. For example, if you're a donor and you say, okay, we want to support this, being clear that this is also political, that you as a donor have not just product money, but you have also a political say where you can maybe work against some of the blockages on the political level. So it's not just like, here are the projects, and here we do, and then there are some other actors in advocacy or in diplomacy who kind of do the politics. So that this is like coming, I think, much more together in a holistic approach. And I think what we have also heard, which I found really interesting, is can we even talk about an international community these days? Because very often what we hear in conflict contexts, when you see groups of friends or ambassador groups or donor groups, it's mainly the Western internationals that come together and then talk about this is the international community. While of course it's much more diverse, it's the regional organizations, it's the neighboring countries, it's Russia, China, it's so many. So we cannot even talk about what the internationals can do, but we can talk about what certain internationals can do, or maybe very often what they should better not do, and how we all can sort of try that this locally and the homegrown processes to understand also what is a homegrown process and how best to support it. And I think that's really starting from the point, what are the things and the processes that are already working and how can they be nurtured in a process. But it means also solidarity across contexts, with networks and people that can give the solidarity, which and also on the international front. So I think it's really talking about, if we talk about enabling citizens to be part of decision making, how would that look like, and how is this blocked, and what are sort of all these processes that can come together, and also recognizing there is no ideal, perfect peace process. It will never be, because it's different opinions is part of daily life and conflict. So it's about how do we get closer to something that is a pathway towards peace and inclusive societies, and not like what's the perfect model, but rather being flexible and creative in being a critical friend from the outside. And the outside is not just the Western outside, but kind of everything. Okay, so I would say I leave it like that in terms of sum up, and how we can, maybe a last word is better accompany processes rather than just always doing like bits and pieces of action only. And I hand over to Hannah for a final motivation closure. Thank you very much all for coming. Also, thanks for all our peers and basically the many volunteers to moderate the sessions. And thank you all for your engagement. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Thania. And coming from you as the main inspirer and motivator of today, it's nice to have a quick last word, just to say also a huge thank you to everyone for joining us. A huge thank you to all our moderators who took time out of their busy schedules to help us today. I hope that everyone has had some interesting conversations, met some new people. If we did the poll again, I hope there would be no one with a 0 now. So that you have met each other. Just a couple of things, connect with each other, connect on LinkedIn. If you want to see the graphic in all its final glory, we will be posting it on our LinkedIn page. So make sure you follow the Inclusive Peace LinkedIn page to see that. Also, there should be a feedback form popping up after the event. Once you've exited Zoom, please, it would be great if you could fill that out. And finally, I just want to encourage you all to participate in the main plenary session specific to this thematic track of Geneva Peace Week, which is called Moving Beyond Securitization. And this is going to be a reflective, participatory and interactive session where all Geneva Peace Week attendees can connect and share ideas. So you'll find, I think, hopefully someone's put a link to that, yes, in the chat. Thanks, Julia. So you should all definitely move along to that on Wednesday and bring some of what we've discussed today to the plenary. But I think with that, unless there's any final words from anyone else, I think it's we'll let you go now a few minutes after the hour. And thank you all very much again. Have a wonderful rest of your Mondays wherever you are in the world, and hope to see you at an Inclusive Peace event again soon. Thank you.